So our thesis was that consumers don't want brands anymore. They want heroes. They want brands to solve problems and add value to their lives. And that's where Hero was born in that moment. And then we launched in 2015.
The clients that you manage with Hero Collective, is there a certain profile that you're looking for?
We're either trying to help you fix your brand or we're helping try to accelerate it. And, we believe every brand has a cultural superpower. And the most successful brands in the world are the ones that solve problems.
Do you have any examples of how you're leveraging AI?
The person who is inputting all of those prompts is really important in the creative process to have a fuller cultural perspective to ensure that it still has a essence of humanity that really represents your understanding of your consumer.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Andres Figueira, and I'm going to be your host for the day. This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Company, helping fast-growing teams hire exceptional remote talent from Argentina, South Africa, and beyond. We connect companies with world-class professionals who bring skill, reliability, and a global perspective to every role. And just for our listeners, we're offering an exclusive 10% discount on your first hire. All you need to do is visit globaltalent.co, click Start Hiring, and mention the podcast listener discount when we reach out. And with me here today, I am speaking with Joe Anthony, CEO and founder of Hero Collective, a 100% independently owned digital-first creative agency. And with that said, Joe, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent, Andres. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on your show and have what I'm sure will be a insightful and spirited conversation.
I'm so glad, and I'm feeling the same way. We're very happy that we were able to make this work. And just so that we can hit the ground running, Joe, and get the audience a bit more in context, would you be able to tell us further about your background, how you came to found Hero Collective, and just what it does in your own words?
Wow. I mean, I know we only have 30 minutes, but I'll try to keep it short. Look, I'm a career marketing services entrepreneur. I grew up in Queens, New York, one of the most diversified urban areas in the world. I like to identify as a public school kid from Queens. Played sports, which enabled me to go to a really good school in Boston. And I came home and I had this entrepreneurial bug that I wanted to or itch I wanted to scratch. And I was trying to figure out really early on in my career how I would be able to start a business with little to no resources. And I started promoting parties in the New York City kind of club scene. And this is back in the mid to late 90s, not trying to age myself. I started out in my entrepreneurial career wanting to manage music artists. I wanted to be a music manager. And so by throwing parties, it afforded me an ability to kind of connect with the really cool people, the influencer class at that time in the New York City kind of music industry, entertainment industry, fashion industry, et cetera. And I found myself, I was working at the New York Times. I only had one job out of college, and I worked for the New York Times for 2 years. And a buddy of mine who I went to college with was interning at J. Walter Thompson and asked me to participate in a focus group because he knew I knew a lot of cool people having kind of been in or trying to be an aspiring music manager and a club promoter.
Okay.
So I ran over there. And it was to make Hush Puppy shoes cool and relevant again. I'm not sure if you guys who are millennials or Gen Z know about Hush Puppy shoes, but they existed.
I do.
So I went into this, conference room, this focus group, just trying to get free lunch and a free gift card for participating. But I wound up saying something profound enough where they offered me a retainer to come back a few times a week and brainstorm with their account team on how to make Hush Puppy shoes cool and relevant again. So that started it. So lo and behold, my music manager career was kind of fizzled out. And then I started going where the money was. And I realized that my superpower was really helping brands connect to culture. And Hush Puppies was my first client. I don't know if you guys read Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, where he references Hush Puppies as one of the biggest brand comebacks of all time. I like to consider myself somebody who imprinted on that moment. But that catalyzed my entrepreneurial career in marketing. I started a consultancy. Then I got Tommy Hilfiger, and then I worked with Nike. And then by the time I was 30 years old, I was running, an 80-person agency working for brands like the U.S. Army, Allstate Insurance, Nintendo, and kind of grew that. And then in 2008, the housing crisis happened. I went through really an implosion in my business. And in 2008, that was just a really incredible kind of transition period, kind of like one that we're going through right now. You had the advent of the iPhone, the introduction of social media. Millennials were graduates into the housing crisis, and they were ushering in this new mentality of purpose. So I wound up exiting my old agency that I founded, and I started Hero because at the time, obviously the world was on fire. We're post 9/11 housing crisis. You're starting to kind of see social media start to create visibility around certain things that most consumers weren't aware of. The need for greater transparency in terms of how brands, communicated in the world. So our thesis was that consumers don't want brands anymore; they want heroes. They want brands to solve problems and add value to their lives, and that's where Hero was born in that moment, and then we launched in 2015. Mhm.
Okay, that's so like first of all, you've worked with so many big brands, Joe. That's so cool. Like I recognized every single name. And I do know what Hush Puppies is. Actually my dad used to buy a lot of Hush Puppy shoes. But something that stayed on my mind when you just told us the story. And Joe, do you remember what was the comment you said in that meeting that made them ask you to return to Hush Puppies and act as a retainer? Do you know what the insight was that you provided?
Well, it's funny what you just said is nobody wants to buy your dad's shoes, right? And I think that was really kind of the problem at the time is they had this kind of dusty kind of positioning, of being kind of like this cheap shoe. And I was like, you need to reinvent Hush Puppies by making it more colorful, more dynamic, more stylish, and you have to think about collaborating with more edgy designers to create more limited edition SKUs that took legacy and then modernized it, right? And a lot of legacy brands try to do it on their own without adopting like third party credibility to give them that entree back into audiences that either don't know them, don't remember them, or have this kind of stereotype vision in their minds, which is obviously what a lot of people had with Hush Puppies at the time.
And Joe, after you created Hero Collective, I can see in what's it called? Like I saw in LinkedIn that you guys have about 50 to 200 employees. How long did it take for you to actually determine it was not just you and you would just create a bigger agency?
Well, having run a mid-size agency before, the goal was obviously not to get into another startup type of thing where I was struggling again, and I had a lot of, equity and relationships that wanted to support me on that next part of my journey, right? And so, actually, my first client at Hero Collective was Pfizer, and a lot of people say, "Well, wow, Joe, you just started another agency and you got like a Fortune 50 company to be your first client." And I think that a lot of times success is a function in the agency space of relationships that you can leverage to say, "Hey, I need you to support me. I have a new agency concept. Give me a shot." But a lot of it is also need versus expertise, right? And the timing in which those things intersect. And I think at the time, I had a relationship or a friend at Pfizer. I had no pharmaceutical experience. And they were like, just come in, be a dark horse, kind of agency in this pitch that we have. We're looking for something disruptive and different. And obviously, the pharma industry is highly regulated. So doing
Yeah.
kind of innovative, disruptive things are things that scare them to death, right? But going in without kind of that pretext gave me a level of courage and optimism, and also being the underdog in the pitch. I said, look, I had nothing to lose. Let me just throw things out there that may seem wacky. And they wanted to actually they had this drug that was coming out to target men and women that had stage 4 breast cancer. And
Okay.
stage 4 breast cancer is pretty, a dark story to tell because essentially if you have stage 4, you're going to pass away at some point. You're going to succumb to the disease. So this drug really just prolongs life versus providing you with a cure. And so a lot of the times, that narrative isn't talked about because it really touches on morbidity and, and those are tough conversations to have. But anyway, we proposed doing this incredible campaign where we brought in Instagram photographers and Nat Geo photographers to shoot women and men suffering from this disease and do this day in the life gallery. And we launched Pfizer's first Instagram handle ever. Right? They didn't even have one at the time. But we wound up being shortlisted for a Cannes Lion. It was my first foray into pharma. We won the business, and then we had like a 5-year run just working with them on doing a more dynamic thing. So a lot of the times, building an agency isn't going in with the idea of, hey, I want to build a 50 or 100-person agency. I have a solution that people need right now, and if we communicate it correctly, it'll scale on its own, if you have the right opportunities and access to the right opportunities, right? And fortunate for me, I had built up enough, positive equity over my career where I had enough relationships that I were able to call on to at least give me an opportunity to present my ideas.
Amazing, amazing. So it's like you already had a kind of like the ability or the opportunity to have a seat at the table and actually pitch your ideas and gain this, what's it called? Like this exposure that allows you to then
Sure.
scale. That is so cool, man. And in terms of also the clients that you manage with Hero Collective, is there a certain profile that you're looking for? Do they have to meet a certain criteria in order to be able to work with you? Or how are you able to determine if it's going to be a good fit or not?
Well, there's two types of brands that we work with. Ones that are already heroes and we want to amplify their heroism, right? Or ones that need an injection of heroism because they're borderline being looked at as villains, right? So we're we're
Okay.
either we're either trying to help you fix your brand or we're helping try to accelerate it.
Okay.
And, we believe every brand has a cultural superpower, right? And this is, you may have read Simon Sinek's book, The Power of Why and things like that. And, a lot of people will say it's not what you do, it's why you do it. People buy that, right? And, we've kind of evolved that concept into this idea of your cultural superpower, and your cultural superpower allows you to act heroically. And the most successful brands in the world are the ones that solve problems. They don't just sell you things, but they solve problems, and those problems are things that they have identified that are endemic to their brand ethos or equity that they are authentically or have credibility to solve. So for example, Dove doesn't sell soap, they sell self-confidence. When have you ever heard of them telling you how good it cleans your body? That's not what they sell, right? They sell this idea of disrupting the concept of what traditional beauty standards are. And and that is based upon a problem that existed in predominantly Western society where we glorify a certain type of beauty profile. And by solving that, what they've done is translate or broaden their equity to be more than just a product that has a utility, but has kind of an emotional currency that people want, right? So now more and more, where we're in this constant, almost conversational based experience every day, where we're constantly scrolling, jumping in and out of conversations. If brands don't find a way to dimensionalize their offerings so that they can be in a conversation, then they just become a passing impression.
And Joe, in terms of the clients as well, is there a certain region that you are used to working with? Like, is it only in the States, or do you also take international clients? Is there any what's it called? Like any specific the profile there?
No, oh, that's a good question. I think obviously US continues to be the largest market. We would love to expand. We're even talking about how we can expand to different parts of the emerging world, where there are emerging demographics that are starting to increase exponentially in their buying power, that are influenced by a variety of kind of Western pop cultural influences and motivators that we can help, those kind of domestic brands, leverage the best practices of what we've been able to do here successfully in the States there. Um, but, I think a lot of it for us has really been about, letting things happen organically. We haven't invested actively in building infrastructure in, other geos. I think with what's happening globally right now, and all the global tensions and some of the trade winds around AI, the marketing industry is going through a massive kind of identity crisis right now in terms of trying to figure out what it's going to be. The opportunities aren't as vast as you may think, which, in these times, it's better to stay small and nimble than to kind of be aggressive and expand until the dust settles and you can figure out where those opportunities are that represent less risk.
Okay, okay. No, no, I understand that. And when you mentioned these like rising demographics and stuff, would it be places like, for example, South America, countries like that, or maybe just going
Sure.
over to Europe, which I think isn't that much of a developed market yet in that style? Because the US is the dominant one for sure.
Sure. Look, I think, South America, Africa, certain parts of Asia, India, for of course, is just a huge behemoth that, look, 50%, I believe 50% of the world's teenagers will be from Africa by 2050.
Wow.
Yeah, 1 in 4 people by 2050 will be from Africa. So when you start thinking about like these geos that are not experiencing population decline but actually population increases, they're India, they're Africa, they're certain parts of South America. US is has a net population replenishment rate, right? So there's more people in America dying every year than being born. And, some of these countries, even China is experiencing that as well. So, looking at where the puck is going and where there is emerging demographics, where there's emerging consumerism, where there's emerging economies that are going to create new jobs. I think all of that are things we got to keep an eye on, and figure out how to position ourselves. And it's definitely on our radar. Like I said, but I think right now the environmental conditions make it, we're being a little bit more patient in terms of what that looks like for us in the future.
And Joe also would love to know is then in this style of working of how the market is now, is Hero Collective a remote first company, or do you guys have an office where you're able to meet up with the team? How does that work for you guys?
Look, I think coming out of the pandemic, as a independent operator, I'm always trying to find efficiencies in where I can invest our resources more effectively. And having an office just didn't make sense for us, unless, coming out of the pandemic, because we were able to hire talent, not only just, in and around the country, but all over the world, that allowed us to, one, tap into different skill sets, um, get more productivity out of people versus, requiring them to use 2 or 3 hours of their day to commute. It just made sense, and we had to be more competitive, right? Coming out of the pandemic, I think there was a lot of bigger agencies that were offering higher compensations than we were, but maybe requiring you to come in 2 or 3 times a week. So, being able to offer somebody full remote was an advantage that allowed us to land a lot of great talent, at a maybe more compensation rate that was more competitive for us. So we've leaned into that. We built a culture that really we can't even see the benefit of going back into the office right now. I think there are definitely some departments that get together more frequently, whether there are creative departments and things that have an opportunity to engage each other more. But with the tools that are available to us today, especially in this AI era, working kind of remotely or virtually is almost an advantage that we think we don't want to mess with.
Now, of course, and like I'm a major advocate for remote work, so I totally agree with everything that you're mentioning. I feel it's a very sound option, and the benefit of being able to stay at home and that the company approves it is something that is really enticing to the employee just because of the fact of what you're mentioning. It's like the commute is taken away from the equation. You can spend more time being effective or efficient in your job or whatever you need to do at home. If you're a mom, a dad, anything like that, it also helps out with that side of life too. So I love
Sure.
what you're mentioning. And also, since this is the global talent company in the end, I'd love to know, Joe, then, as you mentioned, do you hire talent then outside of the States? Do you know, like, would you be able to tell us which countries you've looked for talent in that have worked really well?
Um, look, we've used talent in Mexico, Mexico City. We currently have a dev team out of Poland that does a lot of our back end development just for, different projects that we do. We have people that have lived in Spain, the UK. We've used talent in Bogota. that have done a lot of like post-production work for us, animation work, production work. We've obviously, as a creative agency, we shoot a lot overseas. So a lot of times when we shoot overseas, we'll utilize and leverage local production talent as well. So, I think for us, leaning into this kind of like global workforce and talent pool has worked for us extremely well because obviously there are more competitive rates that we can pay. But also, we find that there's a lot of different sensibilities or creative sensibilities that people have from the different lived experiences that they have that they bring into our culture that just adds more value and enriches the culture overall.
Of course. No, I love that. The perspective that somebody from a different upbringing than you can bring to the table, and if you're able to understand and leverage that, it really creates a more what's it called, like globalized approach to creating this type of media or marketing or anything like that that really allows people a lot more people to resonate with it. So totally agree with that. And I love to use this as a segue, Joe, because after I talk about the teams and the people in your company, I then love to jump to AI, which is the trending topic of the moment. So do you have any insights or do you have any examples of how you're leveraging AI these days to help you out with your endeavor?
Look, I think I try to look at AI in two different ways. AI is a tool, not the product. And AI should be used as a tool to enhance the final product. And we, like anyone else, would be foolish not to be leveraging the efficiencies that AI presents and provides us in enhancing or creating a better product. So whether that's generative AI that we use to develop any type of creative works or compositions or demo assets that give us an opportunity to win pitches more efficiently, or even in the creation of the final work in terms of what it affords us from a post-production standpoint, from an image retouching. There's so many different things that it can help us with respect to speed and efficiency that just make have so much impact. Copywriting is incredible. Narrative development, narrative construction, script development. All these things are things that are extremely beneficial for it. Once you start trying to make AI the product where you're not really governing the inputs to ensure that the output is still very culturally relevant and rooted in cultural truths, which is why the person who is inputting all of those prompts is really important in the creative process, to have a fuller kind of cultural perspective to ensure that there are no tropes or stereotypes, or they're policing the work to make sure that it's not going to be offensive, or that it still has a essence of humanity that really represents your understanding of your consumer. And, to some degree, AI is really about assumptions. And AI is trying to assume what the next thing in the kind of chronology of events is in order to output what you asked it for. And it could only use the data that is available to it to make that next assumption. And sometimes it nails it, and sometimes it doesn't. And there's a lot of cultural idiosyncrasies that exist that like, live in this kind of gray area that sometimes are subconscious to us because we've been living our lives innately our whole lives, that the AI doesn't pick up on those things
Exactly.
because they're not things it's tracking as actively. So that's really where the curation component and like the cultural fluency component and having someone who really knows how to police that process is really important.
Of course. No, and that is exactly what I feel is like the place AI is at right now, because I feel AI is like a little child with a super mind that can accept so much data and information and process it, but it doesn't
Sure.
know exactly what the next proper step is. So what we're becoming now is more like AI curators or the judges of what it outputs so that you can then decide if it's an appropriate way of saying what you want or if you want to change it and tweak this and that. But I love how you're able to actually like pinpoint the exact issue with it, because that's also what I feel it is, because it can do almost anything. But if you just leave it by itself, it'll eventually fall down, stumble, make a mistake, and it's like, ah, it's not at that point just yet. Just
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. But then, Joe, I have one final question for you before we actually finalize the show, and that would be is, in terms of Hero Collective, what you've been doing, and now that we've started Q2 of 2026, what are your goals as the CEO and founder towards the end of this year?
Wow. One, not to let AI get me to be extinct. Like, I think all of us agency owners are, I'd be lying if we said we weren't nervous, right? I think the creative industry is flattening a little bit. I think brands are demanding the efficiencies at the expense of sometimes the creative output. And you're starting to see creativity become somewhat commoditized and an efficiency play. And I think consumers are also used to or starting to become conditioned to consume this like AI slop that's coming out. And so if you're starting to be fed a specific type of content with a level of repetition, you start to believe that that's the benchmark for good. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that efficiency is going to result to the output of a lot of content that is not really indicative of what good creative storytelling is. But if people get used to it and engage with it at a level, then most brands or CFOs or CEOs who want to look at or scrutinizing marketing budgets will say, let's just go with that. It's working. But I don't know if that's sustainable for brands who have a lot more competition. You just have, just all of these kind of cookie cutter types of renditions of what everybody is doing. So I do think that the industry has to go through a kind of a reckoning of understanding the guardrails that will determine what AI means within the context of our industry, at least from a creative standpoint. And then you'll start seeing kind of like, more evidence as to where we're going to go and if I should be thinking about doing something else. My feeling is that the creative industry is not going to look a lot like it has been in the very near future. You're going to see less players. The kind of upper funnel big investments like Super Bowl are going to be vehemently fought after by like the big remaining agencies. What's left at the middle funnel will be a lot of investment in more of the creator economy, will be invested in creators creating content, will
Of
be
course.
a level of efficiency that makes it difficult for that mid-size agency to survive because the budgets and the margins aren't there. So, it's time will tell. I think the jury's still out, but I do think the future of agency owners are to develop intellectual property, help their clients develop intellectual property, and find some way to kind of be on the equity side of the exchange versus just on the service side.
But I really do feel, Joe, that you're going to be able to survive this transition just because, man, you're so cool and you're so real with how you're looking at everything that I feel that is
Appreciate
the
that.
aspect that will actually mark the difference in who survives and who does not, man. So I'm sure Hero Collective is here to stay for a longer while.
Hope you're right. I'm knocking on every piece of wood as you're talking right now. Yeah, no, no. Look, I think, when I look at back in my career, just to wrap up, I've survived 9/11, I've survived the housing crisis, I've survived the pandemic. I'm sure I'll survive the AI apocalypse, as a lot of people like to say. But you just have to be flexible now. I don't think you could root yourself in any one truth. You just have to be adaptive.
No, no, it's completely true, man. And as I mentioned before, like I'm sure you guys will get through it and will overpower it and use it to your advantage because I have no doubt that'll be happening. But with that said, Joe, thank you so much, man, for hopping on the show with us, telling us your insights, your story, and everything you're looking towards. So yeah, man, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andres, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Enjoyed myself.
No problem at all. And to anybody who is here with us and listening, we also appreciate you being able to come to these podcasts to listen to the different personalities that we're bringing on and all the different industries that we are talking to. So with that said, have a good one.